You're about to watch a recorded session from a live event brought to you by Lower Street, a podcast agency for brands. For more recordings like this or for information on other podcast events we have coming up, head to lowerstreet.co/events.
There is certainly a growing demand for live podcasting. There's kind of something about stepping out from behind the mic, right? Getting in front of real people, and that changes the experience entirely. Be it the community, the connection, that real energy. There's kind of a different level of engagement in that space. It can be raw, but regardless, it's a real experience. When you take a podcast live, whether it's a full stage production, a campus panel, or even a small members only event, you're creating a different kind of value for your audience. You deepen community connections. Listeners kind of stop being the anonymous download behind the screen. They start being more real people who meet each other in person. And if the event calls for it, you give your most loyal audience that VIP experience, something memorable, maybe even entirely exclusive if that's what it calls for. You open up the space for all sorts of supplemental content opportunities as well. So bonus content, cut downs, social clips, blogs, Substack posts, what have you. All kinds of supplemental content that can come post-event. And you position your brand or your show as more than just a feed. It becomes a hub for actual connection. So yes, the word connection and community will come up quite a bit today, but I want you to think for just a second. Imagine yourself being at an event rather than just in this conversation. Think about how that setting changes the experience for you. You can even think the live music, different than listening to a studio album. That changes the words a bit. I think in my mind, connection, community becomes something beyond the words themselves because there's meaning to it. What you're hearing, who you're seeing, what you're eating, what ideas come out of that experience when you're walking away, what are you thinking of, and how are you getting home? All of those different ideas. Those in-person moments that you really can't replicate online. And again, there's just massive value in that. Right now, we are seeing that more and more brands are exploring how to tell their stories in a live venue, bringing that story to the real world. And so that's what we're discussing today. Okay, so we've got a seriously decorated group panel today, a group of podcast strategists and producers to help break this all down and talk more about that connection, that energy, because they've been part of it. They've produced shows, they've helped organize, or they've been up on that stage themselves. So today, our panel joining us is Jenny Barber. Jenny leads podcast strategy at REI. If you listen to the show Wild Ideas Worth Living, which I really highly recommend, that's her work. Jenny specializes in digital and audio storytelling. She's got a lot of experience in podcast development. She's very well versed in monetization strategies, talent management, and multi-channel go-to-market strategies. And recently, she worked to bring Wild Ideas Worth Living out of the studio and onto the stage outside Fest. Welcome, Jenny. Next, we have Oriana Marrone. Oriana is one of our producers here at Lower Street. She and her team recently produced a big live event for parentheses, a major university that I can't mention the name today, though I really want to. I'm sorry, but perhaps you'll guess. But we're going to dive into how she helped develop the show, working, behind the scenes to get that to the live setting. And last but certainly not least, we have Mel Webb Wilkinson, another one of our amazing producers here at Lower Street. Mel's handled plenty of creative and logistical challenges taking shows on the road. She also hosts and produces her own show, Detours, which is all about bike packing and ultra cycling, which takes Mel all around the world. She's actually just about to dive into a very long trip to head back out for Detours. Everybody, welcome. Hello. Thank you for joining. This is so awesome. And might I say, this is a super badass panel. So I'm very excited. I'm going to direct questions to each of you, but please feel free to jump in wherever. It's more fun if this is more conversational anyhow. But right at the core, why do any of this? Jenny, I'll kick it to you first. Why was it worth it for REI to bring Wild Ideas Worth Living out of the studio and onto the stage at Outside Fest? And maybe just quickly for those who don't know, what is Outside Festival? and when was it? How'd it go? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. And hello, everyone. I'm stoked to be here with you today to talk everything live events. So, yes, we took Wild Ideas with Living to Outside Festival, which is basically the South by Southwest for the outside community and industry. So there was music, there was food, it was multi-day, there was stages with panels, and it was amazing. And you're just outside. If anyone's huge, I used to live in Denver, beautiful setting. We're just under the trees in Civic Park all weekend long. So couldn't get a better setting. Um, and REI was there. So Wild Ideas with Living, I think Nate said this, but it is one of the podcasts for the REI network. And REI is now outdoor retailer. So REI was going to be at Outside Fest in a bigger capacity. We were one of the sponsors. And so first and foremost, why we were there was to really like support the brand, the bigger brand that is REI. So the way I think of it is like we have REI and that's a brand, but also Wild Ideas is a brand within a brand, right? So we're supporting a brand, but we're also our own brand. So we were able to, with showing up in hosting these conversations, and we were able to support the big brand. But then also, obviously, it was an opportunity for us to bring the show and the spirit of the show to an extremely aligned, like our perfect ideal audience, right? And so to back up a little bit, what it looked like for us to be outside festival was two main stage events is what they called it, and those were in with Alex Honnold and then John Florence. So those were packed houses of almost 600 to 800 people. Our host Shelby was there, and it was a conversation between them. And then we also had a smaller activation within REI's footprint at the event. And we had a Wild Ideas Worth Living stage where we had programming on Saturday and Sunday. And those were more like bite-sized 30-minute conversations on that stage as well. And then we also had one more event, which was what Nate kind of is talking about, we'll dig into, was a members only VIP event at REI on the day before the event. And that ended up being like a 200-person intimate event with Alex Honnold, where it was super, very community oriented. And I'll dig into more of those details. But so why we were there to support REI as a brand, but then also for the connection to our audience, for the exposure of the show. And I'll say it was a lot of fun as well.
That's so cool. And so I want to dive into so many different aspects of that, but I wanted to ask because I think just like the background of live events, why they're starting to pop up a little bit more. Oriana, last week you and I were having a conversation and we kind of got into the pandemic as you do. I guess we're still talking about that. And you mentioned that you just felt like after the pandemic, brands and communities were so hungry for ways to connect. How do you think that plays into the rise of live podcasts at the moment?
Yeah, the gift that keeps giving, the pandemic.
Right.
No, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that we all can acknowledge that podcasting as an industry really blew up as a result of the pandemic, right? We lost so many avenues for connection so quickly. And I think, the human element of podcasting and the intimacy that you can get in podcasting, I think became such a draw for filling those voids of connection that we all kind of were, inevitably finding. And I think as we're starting to, thankfully the conversations have lessened. Thankfully, I think most of our fears have subdued about, what the day to day is. And I think that is just allowing that spark to kind of reignite. People want that connection. And I think we're kind of in a place now where we're seeing those kind of merge, right? We found loyal audiences, we have great stories that are being told, and people want to sort of dive into that even deeper. And it's been really incredible to see sort of that dedication that your audience has and the closeness that they feel that you've really been able to curate. And I'm sure for many of us it was a result of these last few years, throughout the pandemic. And yeah, I think we're going to see it more. I think it's going to become more and more popular as people understand the value that it really holds, both for connection and for the brand, I think ultimately.
Having both recently produced these events, is that the sense on the ground as well when people are showing up? Like, is there just kind of a different level of engagement that you see?
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's, like I said, I think there's such a craving for it, and I think that people really want to take that next step of depth when find that loyal audience. And not every audience member is, particularly loyal. Not every single one are going to like make the effort to come to a live event, but you do really, it becomes such an opportunity to really get to know your core audience. And I felt like that was really what we got to do at the event. There were so many times people came up and was like, "Oh my God, I love your show," and XYZ, and that conversation you had about this and the guest. And you really, as a podcast and as a brand, really start to understand the impact that you have in a way that I think is so, so, so wonderful.
Can I
That's
jump
awesome.
in and piggyback on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
Is Oriana, I love that you're saying like it's that special thing that I think we as the shows and as people who are creating these shows have that I really encourage this group to like lead with as we go into the next couple years, because what I'm seeing is brands are asking for it. And so other brands, so like think of a sponsor, our title sponsor for Wild Ideas is Capital One, and they've already been like, how can we do more of these
Yeah.
next year? So they're asking our shows to help them activate and reach the audience they want in real life. And so because we're kind of, I don't know, our shows we're great at connection. We're creating spaces that are safe and fun to be in. These brands are coming not just to us. I'm seeing it, and everyone's talking about bringing things.
Yeah.
How can we bring people together IRL? So just like be aware of that as well. Like own that as
Mhm.
you can make these like collaborations with other brands and get supported in that way. So
I feel you. We had two schools from like other sort of secondary schools that were a part of the university reach out about like, oh, that was an event
yeah,
and it had
Close to
such an impact. How do we do that? Yeah.
yeah.
We actually ended up starting a podcast with one of those schools, in fact, as a result. So
Really cool.
Awesome.
I do want to get into what can kind of come out of these events. So both those points, let's put those on ice, but really cool points. Mel, you're literally chasing people around the globe to meet them where they're at in real life. Talk to me about taking a show to an event, meeting people in real life as a producer, as a host.
Yeah, it's so tricky because I'm wearing multiple hats when I'm in the room with those people. I'm thinking about like, okay, the production of the show and then the host. But I think above anything, you mentioned this in your intro, Nate, is like when we're sitting at our desks and producing shows in these environments, we just see downloads and we just see numbers on a screen. And it can be so disheartening to be like, oh, I only have X number of downloads, or oh my gosh, maybe you have so many downloads, but they're really just numbers and there's not that level of connection. Whereas when you go in person, you have a room full of 30, 100 people, however many people, like those are all your downloads and they're staring you in the face. And that is both terrifying and so exciting because you have the opportunity to really get to know them as people beyond those numbers. And that can really inform so many things for your show. I also like makes me feel so much closer to my listeners to be like, okay, am I speaking their language? Like, how do they interact with me in person? It's kind of shocking to me. Like, people are so, they'll come up to me and tell me crazy stories that I'm like, oh, you feel that comfortable? And I'm like, what did I do to create that? But then I'm like, okay, wait, take a step back. Like when I put my producer hat on, I'm like, that's amazing. That's what I want the show to keep curating is if someone can feel, at least for like my show in particular, if someone can feel that level of closeness, I'm doing something right. And even if it's just one person that comes up and gives you a story like that, I want to channel more and more of that type of language and vibe, etc. But yeah, like seeing your downloads and your subscribers in real life is such a wild feeling, but then gives you that like next step to go deeper with them.
Very cool. Yeah, seeing your downloads, walking out and about. I love that. So let's get practical for a second, because all three of you have done the other side of this, which is the planning side. So if we're looking at one of these events, having to develop it, put it together, Jenny, you've said it doesn't just need to be the stage version of your show. And I want to unpack that a little bit. It's kind of what I said at the beginning, like the your favorite album when you go see your favorite band live, like you want the experience to be different. Can you talk about the thought of bringing the spirit of your show live, even if the formats change or whatever may change? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and I love the example of like an album versus a live show. Like everyone in, I assume most people in here have been to a live show. And for me, at least, when I go to a concert, what I love the most is the little side chats from the performer, or they tell the little extra stories that you don't hear on a produced, super clean version, right? So the thing I want you to think about when you're thinking about your show, the only rule it would be hold on to the spirit of your show, right? And what it's about. And so for wild ideas, it's being outside and chasing a wild idea. Great. That's the only thing. Other than that, it could still be like a talk show how you do it. It's naturally because it's in a live format. Other quirks are going to come out. But I would say like try to think outside of the box. Like really just blow up the format and do something, try something wild and crazy and different. And something just to kind of like plant a seed and spark some inspo is like think about your audience. How can you get them involved? So before the event, maybe source questions. What was really successful for us is we asked for questions. We knew that we were interviewing Alex Honnold on that private event the night before the event, and we asked, kind of got our audience excited via mid rolls before, and said submit your questions to Alex before, and we actually did. It ended up being the whole event was these community curated questions, which was so fun and so different than the community was asking different questions than our producers, right? Because we got to, they see us from, they have different, from different angles, they have different experiences. So think about getting the community involved like that, getting the community involved at the event. That's super fun as well. I think we're going to dig in a bit more of how that manifested for Wild Ideas in a few minutes. And then also, we also did a live demo at one of the, not the main stage events, but one of the more like intimate 30-minute events. And that was so cool. We had a fly fisher on, two fly fishers. We were chatting with both of them. And then we broke out a little bit early to do a demo. And it was a huge, huge success. Guests got to talk with the fly fishers, ask them direct questions, got to actually try to use the equipment. So that as well. And I think Q&A, I was a little nervous just with,
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to come up. It's sometimes I think the social media and the internet makes you more scared than you need to be. But the outside team encouraged me like, no, it's fine. Let's just do it. And the Q&A portion was so awesome, from having like a little 12-year-old asking Alex Honnold or anyone a question, or climate activists getting to talk to Jeremy Jones and asking a direct question, to like, every walk of life. You really get to see your audience. I think like Mel and Oriana both have pointed to this. Like we got to meet them and see like, oh, wow, all of these walks of life are our audience. So yeah, think outside of the box. I really don't think there's any rules. Like I think the Wild West of podcasting now we're not as Wild West, but I think live events, like let's take that energy and channel them into live events.
I'm guessing Alex Honnold did not do a demo. There was no free soloing. He was not
No,
quick
no,
demo.
actually not true, because there is a climbing wall in Denver's flagship store, REI store, and there was a climbing wall at the festival. So not at our talk, but we afterwards pointed them to at least go climb with them at the wall. But the line to talk to him and ask questions afterwards it went for a while.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Speaking of Q&A, Ariana, I know your event leaned very heavily on Q&A. Can you talk to me about kind of creating those organic moments, and how'd you build that in? Was it intentional to build it in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think, and really just want to echo Jenny's point, because 100% she's right. You do really have to think outside the box for these. It shouldn't be a carbon copy of what you do on the show. We can do that on the show and not have to, waste the time, effort, and money it takes to put these on. So the basic structure that we had was our main taping of what we considered sort of the episode that we were going to be sharing publicly later, the panel that we had to sort of dive into those things a little bit more, and then we had a Q&A. And we really did want this to be audience centric. The goal of the event wholeheartedly was to gain more subscribers and to increase the visibility of the audience for the local community that we knew we definitely had seen investment from already. And so we started those things early, like as soon as we started promoting the event, there were opportunities to start submitting questions. There were opportunities to understand who you were going to be, who our guest was going to be, who our panelists would be, how you're going to be able to interact. We had a sort of a mixer before and a more private mixer following as well, just to really help with facilitating conversation and really getting to know kind of what the audience wants to know about this topic and where they want us to dig deep. I think it was great to see that. We had a whole section, of course, for the Q&A. We had 2 mics in place. We had the questions that had been submitted ahead of time. We also had a QR code on the screen for anonymous questions. So really kind of leaving as many avenues open as we could, because sometimes it can be hard, right? People get nervous. They don't always want to go up to the mic. We're all starting to just get back into this, pressured room. We kept everybody really close so it felt intimate, had our ushers bring people forward and really sit everybody front and then move their way back so that it felt like a full but intimate space. And I think it really ended up kind of blowing our expectations. We were so crushed we had to stop the questions. I think went about 15 minutes over on them anyways, and then still had probably 10 people in line, let alone all of the ones that we had to forego online. So it was a great opportunity to really see, like, to ask for engagement. We really did receive it, and that was a big win.
That's cool. I guess this is kind of obvious as it comes out loud here, but like, you thought about the physical space as well. So how people would show up to the mic, or when, someone had a question. That's interesting. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly need to credit the coordinator of the event, Holly, who really was just an absolute mastermind of these things and really led the way there. But yeah, there was a lot of thoughtful, not making sure that there was room for flow kind of everywhere, how people were going to enter the space, even giving people on campus the opportunity to find it. We had a couple extra seats. We had oversold our tickets, but because it was a free event, we knew that the burn rate was going to be high. So really encouraging people on the day with signs around campus to come. And then, yeah, thinking about the flow, making sure that we brought everybody down. They do a great sort of voice of God to start and really encourage people, like, hey, if there's a seat empty beside you, like, let's bump in. Let's really give this the chance to feel full. And I think we had, give or take, about 250, 300 people with us in a space that held about 450. And there was sort of an upper deck that we ultimately didn't fill, but it ended up making for such a great sort of feeling, I think, both for the people on the stage and for the audience, which was great.
That's awesome. Well done. At the top of this, I mentioned supplemental content, and as the 4 of us as producers, I think it's always like capture, 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 don't miss anything. Mel, I want to ask you, because there is something to creating a moment for a moment and letting that kind of live organically. What if we don't hit record? Is it allowed? Is there something in
Totally
these
allowed.
experiences where those are just as high value as the content we can get after the fact?
Yeah, I'll caveat my response with, like, start with what your goals of the event are. Of course, if the goal of the event is to get a recorded, produced episode, then naturally it has to be recorded. But I think I kind of lean towards stripping away all of that heavy production and over engineering to, if your goal is ultimately to connect with people, to create like exclusive moments for listeners, I would focus more on the experience that you're giving everybody in that event before you even think about the production that's going to come out of it. Because ultimately, if the goal is to connect, then that's what we need to facilitate first, and then all of the stuff can come afterwards. It creates also like a much more intimate setting. Like Jenny and Oriana both mentioned Q&A. If we're asking people to share personal stories or experiences and things like that, a lot of folks would be like, oh, there's a microphone, there's things being recorded, I'm out. I don't want to share at all. And so it goes back to depending on like what your goals are. For me, when I've hosted those events with my listeners, I haven't recorded any. I have regrets about not recording some, obviously, because you hear those magic moments and you're like, oh, I had gold in front of me. So it's not like a perfect science. You have to really just balance what the objective is of having that get together. That being said, like you could totally still capture really small behind the scenes moments if you have the team to be there, kind of like having mics in hand, and you hear somebody telling a story and they're willing to give that to you. Those are ways to kind of have those moments captured without it feeling like this big, potentially stressful opportunity for folks. So always record in some capacity, but if the goal is connection, creating the space first and foremost for that, and then the production and all of that can come later.
I like that.
Can I
I think,
jump in, Nate?
yeah, absolutely.
Because I think I totally agree with Mel. And I think it's interesting because we had those sort of 3 sections of it. And we really intentionally recorded the first one. We had podcast mics on set. We had spaced everybody out so that we could really like optimize for the audio quality. We knew we were sharing this later. But then the panel and the Q&A were so ripe with gold that we should have expected, that we had every intention of hoping came out, but didn't put quite as much planning into the audio of that because we originally thought that was just going to be for the audience in person. And it ended up being such gold that we turned the panel into an episode as well and sort of put in Q&A questions into both of those. And it is one of those things like it feels illegal almost to say like don't record it, but I do agree it's like there's value to giving the audience just that moment alone. But I am so, as a producer, like err on the side of caution, record it all. You never know what kind of gold might strike, and it is just so great to have that now that we got it, you know.
But it does
Maybe
make
we're,
you wonder, right? Like if you'd prepped to that level, like would you have gotten the same thing? And I'm not saying you wouldn't, but just
But you're right, yeah.
I think the thing is leaving the space for the magic and those things to exist versus like over engineering the situation. I think the thing that Jenny said when she was speaking that really, really spoke to me is like, this is participation, not a performance. If you want a performance, well, that's the heavily produced episode you're going to listen to. Whereas participation is like that to me is the real magic of the events.
and to your point, that does fall back to the objectives. Like, why are we out here? Why are we doing this? What's the point? But I love the organic moments that can kind of surface as well. Okay, so takeaway, always be recording, but sometimes don't record, but always be recording when you're not recording.
Yeah, exactly. It's
And
super.
you you mentioned a moment ago something, a moment that did happen at your event. I'd love to hear the story about when you asked the audience to turn to each other and actually engage them. Tell me about how that kind of unfolded.
Yeah, this ended up being one of those magic moments where Oriana, you're like, oh, why is a mic not on? And for the audience, we did not record that VIP night, and I am kicking myself. So I know it was magic in the moment, and I wish it was recorded. So I don't have an answer to that either. But yeah, so Nate, we had our host Shelby Stanger. She approached me like before we knew we wanted it to be a community oriented event, and just like the community questions, have them do Q&A. And she was like, well, going back to our why of like, let's introduce the Denver community and this outside festival community to the spirit of our show, to what our show is all about. She suggested, why don't we ask the audience to turn to each other. So when they don't know, because Wild Ideas is very much about getting out of your comfort zone, do something scary, go for it. So turn to someone you don't know and share a wild idea that you're thinking about for the next 2 minutes. And my initial reaction was excited about it, and let's try it out. Again, outside of the box, throw spaghetti at the wall. If it flopped, it flopped. It doesn't matter. But I mean, was it aligned with the spirit of the show? 100% yes. So let's try it. It feels a little, maybe when I'm saying it to this group, like back when we're in elementary school and like share with a friend. And so I was kind of like waiting for the moment, like, is it gonna work? The place erupted with like, it got so loud in there. I'm hearing the shares. I even have chills right now saying this to you all. Like that what they were sharing, it was like this vulnerable moment where your audience wasn't just being connected with the show or the host, they were connecting with each other, which I assume are going to be like-minded as well, right? And so it was just such a cool moment. We had to ask them to like, okay, like please come back to us. Because it was just such a rich moment. Again, we had people sharing with Shelby, with Alex, it was just so cool. I wish I could have bottled up that moment. I guess I have it for myself and the people there, but it was just really cool. And so that's another way of getting like the audience involved. Like, how can you help them connect with each other? That's really awesome. And also that sparked an idea. This is why I also just throw spaghetti at the wall, because you don't know what it's going to turn into. Even if that flop, well, I don't know if it flopped, it would turn into this. But since it was done, it was successful in our eyes. It's actually sparked another idea. We've always talked about like, can we do a wild idea workshop at an event where we actually take the panelists into the audience after, and you can have these like 5-minute mentoring sessions, and they can kind of listen to your wild idea and help like engineer it a little bit with you. And like, so we're thinking for next year, like if we do more intimate 100 or 200 people events, could that work? And based on the reaction from the audience, it sounds like they want to connect with each other. They want to talk with the host, with the guest, to like figure out how to bring these ideas to life, which is the spirit of the show, 100%, right? Mic drop, pun intended. So that's like, it's interesting that one little moment of activating the audience and really learning about them. Do they like this? Do they want to talk about this? Is now like really fueling ideas for the future as well.
Another thing, like I love that you got people to speak to each other, and I've used that tactic at my own events too, because when you like point the mic at the crowd and say like, okay, time for questions, people are so nervous. Or in most cases, if especially a big room. And so the sooner you can break the ice with the audience, give them a chance to come out of their shells. And like that one-to-one connection with the person beside you is such a safer space than speaking to the whole room and sharing your experience. So if you can break that down like right from the get-go, in my experience, it's only like made people like put their hands up mid talk, being like, I have a question right now. And then just like totally breaking the flow and leaning into it and having the conversations versus like segmenting it into the aftermath. Like it's much better to integrate it right off the get-go and give people the one-to-one connection.
And I think that timing, Mel, is actually key and something I didn't mention. So like if you can do it from the get-go, that is like really like creating the space that Nate and Oriana were talking about as well. It's like we get to engineer the space. That's really what we get to do in a live event. And so doing that, like I think it gave permission for the audience to be themselves, to laugh at because it was a not recorded community question event, the answers were a little unhinged. It was so like, but they laughed. Like it wasn't like, oh, can I? It's like almost like we all kind of got to know each other and realized we're all a little bit the same in one way or another. And I think it set this stage for like the energy that night. So I would say +1 to what Mel's saying, like how can you get them in there with you from like at the get-go?
Do you think like everyone is kind of, if you will, in the joke, like part of the community already, or is this a place to attract new audience, new fans as well? Like, how does that kind of unfold?
I want to say that I think that you have to curate the event for the audience that you have, but leave space for people to join. I think it's a fine line, and it feels like a bit of a non-answer answer, like both. But I think there is a balance there of, yeah, the people who do know the show will get maybe some of the deeper cuts and will get some of those moments that they're familiar with from the show, but nothing's going to alienate people who come curious.
On the production side, does an event like this breathe new life into the show, or is there room to pull new ideas? Do you kind of like sit down after and think like, oh my God, we had no idea that like that would respond so well. How do we take that? Is that a new format idea? And I know, Oriana, we were discussing after your event, you actually like secured new future guests for the show from the conversations
Yeah.
that you had there. Is that one of those opportunities that maybe wouldn't have surfaced unless you'd gone through that process?
100%. And it was really like a happy accident a little bit. We had kind of a little bit into the planning, kind of decided like, oh, there is an opportunity here to invite all the guests that we've had on previously. The majority of them, I would say about 90% of the guests that we have on the show are affiliated with the school. Many of them are professors, either within the unique school or within the university. And so we ended up inviting everybody and started the sort of, when we did our big opening, before we went into our first conversation with our main guest, we asked everybody who had participated in the podcast to stand for a moment so we could acknowledge them. And not only was it so cool to see, close to a dozen people stand up, which was great. We weren't sure, how many really had the time for something like this, but we had a great turnout. And there was definitely a moment of like what felt like recognition. Oh, like, I didn't know you were on that podcast. I was just on that. That's so cool that, and when we did our sort of private event following, not only was it great that, I got to meet a lot of these guests in person, people that I've had great opportunities to work with, and got to shake their hand and hear about what a positive experience the show was for them, which is, I mean, great branding in and of itself. Please tell everyone that as a guest, you had a phenomenal time and that you still share the episode and you're so impressed with the quality. Those are music to every producer's ears. But it also started like building other conversations of like, oh, this professor was like, you know what, I remember you guys asked me years ago to do it and that wasn't a good time, but this was incredible, I'd love to be a part of this. And we probably had a good half dozen people that like expressed interest, that said that they had research that they thought would really align with the kinds of conversations we're having. And it was really not like, we didn't build it with the intention, we didn't invite them so that we could have that big moment and like make sure that we sort of secured more people or got more guests interested. But it was such a great knockoff effect of honoring them for that moment and sort of the conversations that it ultimately kicked off.
That's awesome. Jenny, Mel, anything to add on that front? Any surprises?
I've been surprised how many folks have come to, I've done 2 live events, and both of those times, actually, the majority of the people in the room had never listened to the show. They came either with someone or they were really interested in the topic. And that to me was really surprising, but also a great way to acquire new listeners. Like, they
Yeah.
probably are like-minded because they're interested in the topic. And so it could be like they come for the guest, they come for the topic. And then, like Oriana was saying, like, you don't have those deep cuts necessarily that would alienate those new people. And you never make anybody feel bad for having not listened. You just kind of gloss over that fact and treat them as if they've been a long time listener, and that folks are like, whoa, I'm immediately welcomed in and like suddenly part of this community. That goes a long way. But I've been very surprised that there were not as many listeners in the audience as I had expected, but I think that's a good thing.
Cool. I'm just looking at the time, so just a reminder to folks who have joined us today, throw some questions in the Q&A if you have questions for our panel. We'll save like 10 minutes. Obviously, a lot of work goes into this. This is not a one-person thing. There are coordinators, there are producers, the talent themselves, everything that goes into it. These are big events. That said, they're allowed to be a little bit messy, right? Like they're not designed to be perfect. When we're producing podcasts, a lot of work goes into the production, the writing, the scripting, the Q&A before we hit that publish button. How is that different for a live event? And Jenny, maybe starting with you, as you're kind of sitting backstage watching the thing unfold, you obviously have the plan in your head, but it goes the way it goes. What are your thoughts on letting that happen, and where do you kind of course correct?
I mean, in the moment, you just have to let it happen and chalk it up to a learning experience and just know and hope this isn't going to be your last live event. You're always going to it's like I don't even want to say get better, because you're just going to learn and grow from it. Like, so, and it's going to evolve with your show anyway. So let it be that. Just know and understand and embrace that that is actually the magic of live events, that people are so excited to see the unpolished version of your brand, your host, and just be like, oh wow, I already am like a fan of and trust and like this brand, host, the guests, but now I can tell that they're perfectly imperfect and messy, probably like me because they're human. And so just like one is just like let that be. And you're going to learn from it, and you can really pivot from most anything that happens. I would assume. I don't think it I don't know, knock on wood. I don't know what crazy like catastrophic thing could happen. But so just roll with it and learn from it and grow from it and add it to the next one or subtract from the last one. One of my notes on like this answer was to record or not to record. I will say I do wish that one event was the more like member focused event, the 200-person intimate event was recorded because there was so much magic there. But it's not the end of the day that it's not. So that was one thing that was like a learning for me for this event. And then another one more like logistically is, and I know that our industry is growing and evolving, and just like appearance fees and guest fees for shows do it differently. But in general, I don't think there's like either a large sum or payment for like guests to come on shows. But for live events, you have to think about it differently. Is really the conversation shifts from being a guest on the show to like an appearance fee and showing up at an event. And it is from the guest perspective, or the creator's perspective, it is a different ball game. So that was something that I learned and will approach differently moving forward, is having those conversations with guests, creators, their management before, and just setting your expectations. Either make sure you have the budget so you can go in with that number, or if you don't have a budget and it's more of this community, hey, we're in this together sort of feel, then make sure you have those conversations beforehand, just so it doesn't get weird at the event, post event, and doesn't really like mess up any of these beautiful connections and relationships that you've been hearing us talk about the whole hour, and like sour them for just like, oh, it's just a different beast. It's not apples to apples, recording a podcast to a live episode. So that was one of my big learnings, aside from the record or not to record debate, that I will be thinking about like logistically next time.
Cool. REI is a obviously well-known brand. A lot of fans, huge audience. What about brands that are smaller, maybe with a more specialized product or service? Can an event work for them as well? And how does that change the shape of it? Mel, I'll throw that to you because I know we've discussed that human energy and Jenny's point about the magic. Like a lot of that magic is in the people itself. How does that change if the environment is maybe a little bit more specialized or intimate?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that goes back to the physical space. When there's less people, it can feel a little bit more nerve-wracking. Like if you're in a big stadium, there's, I don't know, places to hide. So giving folks an opportunity to get food or drinks, that's an immediate place for like people to connect when they come in the room. So I think physical space when it comes to smaller events, of course, it's important for all of them. Um, but live events thrive on human energy. Like you cannot manufacture body language in post. There's a ton of magic we can do in post, but we can't manufacture like the buzz and the energy of the room. And I would just say like no matter your size, leaning into that. I think like obviously when you're dealing with like guest booking, thinking about like all of those things, you need to plan really far ahead. But also I would say like plan, but don't over engineer. I know I keep kind of like hammering back to that, but like over engineering scripts, talking points, treating it like a press release, like, those are all major buzzkills and will like dampen the room immediately. And like Jenny said, like leaning into the chaos. But yeah, I think those intimate events are can be really powerful because it like you can see all the people around you, but also then like being in a big stadium is also amazing. So yeah.
Ariana, takeaways for you coming, fresh off into a live event, like anything that you would want to see run differently, anything creatively you pulled from the experience that you'd love to bring back to the show?
Yeah, I think I mean I really echo both what Jenny and Mel said just generally, and I think certainly the human connection piece I'll sort of hammer home again. I think there is something so intrinsically special about like hearing everyone laugh at the joke together. There's such a power in that, and it's so fun when it even translates to, the sort of polished version after. So yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway is to focus on the audience as much as you can, and like curating a space for them to dive deeper into this is, I think, just such an interesting way to think about events, but also just to think about podcasting. Like, how can we continue to allow the audience to deepen that connection, which is what these events often end up doing, whether that's not the intention, or the intention, it's subsequent, it will happen, right? People will connect at these things, and it will deepen their connection and trust with, whether it's an individual or a brand that is throwing this. And I think leaning into that and thinking about how we can keep doing that, and whether that's engaging more with your audience on these host platforms. Spotify certainly making some effort to become a space that we all chit chat in, and maybe you lean into that stuff with poll questions and keeping stuff on your YouTube, and just curating those conversations and those opportunities for people to come together. I think is going to only be a good thing for your brand.
I like your point there because we've spent so much time, or I feel like I have, just ranting about the definition of podcasting. It's been kind of the last 6 to 12 months about what it is, what it needs to be. And I like to approach it like that. Like, this is an arm of it, and real connection can happen to help build the whole ecosystem, not just this one event. Very cool. Well, all right, let's switch to Q&A because there have been some questions that have come through. Brooke in the chat, I want to just go to her question quickly because I think we touched on it, but in terms of the technical side of producing, and we just kind of talked small and big, so there's going to be some nuances and how many folks you have coordinating and so forth, but maybe we just start at like the space, the technical side, the microphones. I'll kind of throw it out to the group here for just maybe tidbits on like where to begin, how to make sure you're checking off the boxes there, and how do you piece it all together.
Yeah, I think to the question of like, do you hire a company to participate? I think where budget allows, having coordinators to help with these things is like always a plus. I was dealing with a fairly big budget for the event that we put on. So we did have multiple teams participate. We had a team that was in charge of video, we had a team that was in charge of audio. On the audio side, yeah, give people space on stage as much as you can, because bleed is such a bitch. And record everything on an ISO track if you have that opportunity. I know we all don't have big giant decks to be working with, but where you can, it does help a lot in the post side of things. Try to keep a mic on the stage going the whole time. That way you do get as much of that gold as you can. Like Mel said, food and drink is a great driver to bring people together. It's also a great driver to get people to the event, especially if it's free. If you are offering them food and drink, they will come. They will come. How invested they will be, how much connection they will grow is a question, but they will come. So I think thinking about those things, and yeah, as much as your budget allows, I think having people to coordinate, especially someone on the day who can, be ready with those just in case scenarios, who can navigate, yes, we do have to lean into the chaos. Yes, it's a live event. Yes, that joke did fall flat and no one laughed, but having someone on the day ready with the just in cases and how to navigate those, I think is a great, great help.
So be conscious of mic bleed, and have a laugh track ready.
Exactly.
Jenny, Annie has a question for you here in the chat. If you were to do something like Outside Festival again, which I believe you are, but correct me if I'm wrong, would you think about expanding on that wild ideas conversation that the audience had, either recording it or building it into a more structured piece of the event or activity?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think, part of that answer is like what the idea that it sparked of like future wild idea workshops moving forward. And I think what I didn't hint at and what I haven't thought about enough is like, okay, how is that recorded? How can we really bring like, that would be really cool if it could be more of a round table sort of thing. And maybe we have that happen at the live event, but maybe we do have more of a curated, produced version of it where I have people sitting down at a table in a room that's great for audio, and we can kind of get a workshop recorded like that and put it out as an extra audio episode. And even just something that that isn't as heavy of a lift that we did do for this the main stage, so big conversation live event with Alex Honnold. That episode just went live today, actually. Yesterday. Today's Wednesday. Yesterday, Tuesday. And at the end of it, we added an outro and said, hey, we actually did talk to the guests at this event. We explained what we did and asked them their wild ideas. And it was so cool to hear from them. If you have wild ideas, submit them to, I think we said we can email them. We also encourage them to leave a review on Apple in that way. And that we would like either shout them out, or towards the end of the year, we kind of do more of like a community focus on them and what they're doing the next year. So those are the ways in which I would think about it. I think a dream would be like a round table, really get like a workshop where you can hear Shelby and maybe an expert in bike packing, Mel, or something, like be able to like workshop with a guest right there and help them figure out how they're going to bring this wild idea to life. So that would be a dream.
Can I +1 the recommendation to leave your wild ideas or whatever you're asking for on the player? Like make it super easy for the listener to not have to exit the app. As soon as they're out of there, the odds of them contributing drops. And so while it might feel like a little bit strange to have a full story and a review, that's still awesome because it helps with the reach of the show. Like there's so many pluses for that. I'm going to steal that idea from you, Jenny. That is one amazing.
The best art comes from stolen ideas. So an anonymous question here in the Q&A. Beyond Q&A, let's throw out some wild ideas here. What could you do in the space? What would be interesting? What would be over the top? What, beyond kind of having someone step up to the mic, what kind of interactions could you host in that environment?
I did this is super niche and slightly unhinged, but in doing one of the bike packing talks and live episodes, I rolled out my bivy bag, and a lot of folks are like, what is a bivy bag? And so I rolled it out. It's something you sleep in. I crawled into it and I was like, look, this is me in the bag. Do you want to try it out? And a lot of people were like, that looks horrible. I don't want to try it. But it did facilitate, like, one, so much great conversation. And two, like, people came up and started interacting with all of my gear. So, like, from a product perspective, that was huge for my sponsors. They were like, okay, the product is in front of people. They get to touch it, feel it, interact with it. People had a lot of laughs. They were like, you're crazy. Some people were like, okay, I'm crazy too. It was like ultimately a win across the board. So I would say like product demos, but not like a demo, an actual like come try it, do it. Like here's an activity that you can do with the product, or something along those lines.
I think too, there's definitely something to think about in ways of like, are you looking to curate sort of like organic audience interaction, or are we more pursuing a direct answer to a question and we need to facilitate that interaction? I think, on the organic side, like we talked about, things like food and drink naturally bring people together and make them discuss. So like mixers of any kind before or after an event will naturally lend to that. But I think when you're looking at things that are a little bit more structured, I think even within those mixers, you can like really be a driver. Like you can go around, like in the private event that we held afterwards, I went around and was like, grabbed my little drink and plate of food and went and asked everyone, as much as I could, what did I think? What did you get at? What do you think we should do next time? What's the right topic to keep talking about? Anything else you think we should be covering on the podcast that we're not covering? Where's your head at now that we've just put all these ideas out there? So I think like, you as a producing the event or participating in the event can really drive that kind of stuff. And, we did stuff like we set up a booth for the podcast itself where you can kind of learn about it. We had links to subscribe. We had little stickers and raffles and things to try to help people get to the table. We also had a table of all of the books that any of the team members that we were speaking with had. So both of our hosts had written a book, our main guest had, as well as a few others. So we had a table where you could purchase those, and we had some of the guests stand with them and sort of talk about their work and things like that. If you can get your hosts and guests involved in those things, for some people those there's almost a celebrity factor there, right? You've been listening to this person in your ears for sometimes years and years, and to get to shake their hand and say what a great show it was, I think can go such a long way. And there's really, really great opportunities to use it as an opportunity to understand what your audience wants and kind of where you can go next, whether that's with the next live event or with the next season of the show.
I had an internship once at a screen printer, and I worked with this guy who was a fish head, and this was in the days of cassettes. And he had a like briefcase of cassettes, and he would rifle through and say, "Oh, this was, Fish in '93 at, so and so Oslo or whatever," and I was there. And he was like so prideful in the fact that he was at that show. And when you were talking, it made me think of exclusivity. And one of the questions we just received, should the event be exclusive? Should it be opened up? And then if it is more exclusive, is gifting appropriate to the folks who are there, kind of in like a members only environment? Is that appropriate? Is that something you could build in, and kind of how would that work?
I and remember, I am coming from right now with a big retailer that has a membership base that we definitely try to make feel like inclusive, but I think there is still something special about being part of a group or a fan club. If it's like, think of your favorite artist. So I think it is okay to lean into that. That is my opinion. Also, from our perspective of being producers, marketers, and curating these events, there's something about creating some sense of control of knowing you're going to have between 100 and 200 people. You're going to be having 20 to 50 people that help you to plan, help you to really make the event right for that group and right sized for that group. So I think if the question, I don't know if it was as much of an exclusive to a certain group or like cap the event and don't just let everyone in. Like, for example, we're doing our other show is Camp Monsters, and we have a live show in Denver this year. And the campfire that we're telling the story around can
Yeah.
only hold 100 to 150. And that's what I have to do. But also I think the intimacy of the event really fits for that camp monster feel. So ask yourself, look at your show. What is it about? Look at the space. That might just be like how small you have to keep it anyways. And then if you get to blow it up and you get an opportunity to have a stage like we did at Outside Festival and they say fill all the seats and standing room only, then do it, but I don't think there's something wrong with having like a VIP event, because you can also we didn't dig in too much at today of like what of like the pieces of content afterwards where you can still invite people in and show them little pieces and give them that value and that magic afterwards. So it doesn't have to be like you're not allowed and we'll never tell you what happened behind these doors.
Yeah. And I'll offer too, I think I agree with everything that Jenny said. And I think it's really about, again, like acknowledging the goal of the event, right? Like, what are you trying to do with it? Because if it's to like grow your audience, then curating something that's really private where you kind of have to know about the podcast like probably isn't going to really help you achieve that goal. Whereas if it is audience interaction and you really want to know from the people who are listening most closely what you should be moving towards as a podcast, if you want that input, a private event probably makes a lot more sense. So I think it's really it's about the goal of the event as much as you can let it drive it. And I think on the gift side, I think it's a great question. We did a raffle for the event, which was hugely successful. It was a collection of like a pair of over-ear headphones, a copy of signed books from the two hosts and guest, and then a couple other, sort of knickknacks and things like that. You had to show proof of subscription in order to enter the raffle, and we did see a big increase in our subscription. I want to say above 10% for each of the main Spotify, Apple, and YouTube platforms, which is where the majority of our audiences have been. So that was a great, great success. I think if you're talking about individual gifts for every single person, for brand awareness, I think those can be great if you like have the budget and want to blow it. But I think in ways of like returning that call to action, in ways of like gaining a subscriber, a pen at the end of the night or, a lanyard under your seat, I think's probably not going to do much in that area. But if it's really just about getting the name out there and building that awareness for the brand, those can be good tools.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you. We are at time, unfortunately. I feel like this conversation could go on and on. Thank you to the three of you, Jenny, Oriana, Mel. Really cool. Thank you for sharing your stories. This is a conversation I think we should extend because it is kind of unfolding. For everyone who signed on today, thank you for participating. Thanks for your questions. Lower Street is actually off to our summer retreat next month. So we are going to be skipping office hours. We'll fill you in on our newsletter. This conversation we'll send out in about 24 hours from now, so keep an eye on that in your inbox. Until then, we'll chat with you more. But thank you so much for everyone's time and participation, and we will talk to you soon. Happy summer, all.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Cheers.